your moderator, Lauren Feldman. It will be my honor and challenge to try to referee this conversation among 6 outstanding panelists. Today we have 3 business owners who have given some thought to opening their books and at least thus far have chosen to reject the idea. They are Dana White, who owns a chain of hair salons based in Detroit called Paralee Boyd. Want to wave, Dana? All right. Jay Goltz, who owns several businesses in Chicago, including Artist Frame Service, a picture framing company, and Jason Home, a home furnishing store. Jay? All right. And William Vanderbloemen, who owns Vanderbloemen Search Group, a Houston-based search firm that specializes in doing searches for churches and other faith-based organizations. You there, William?
Right here.
All right.
Thanks for having me. We
also have 3 business owners who have embraced open book management. In fact, they've been named all-stars by the great game of business. They are Michael Kielbasa of Kielbasa Smoked Meats. Hey, Michael. Chris
Good morning.
McKee. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Chris McKee of Venturity, an accounting firm in Dallas. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Lauren.
And Bob Schwartz of Super Suds, a chain of laundromats based in Virginia.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Bob. Before we get started, I want to emphasize I'm a journalist, so I might be prone to hyping this confrontation a bit. But in reality, this isn't a debate. These people don't hate each other, at least not yet. And I've assured them that their mission today is not to convert anyone. Their mission is to share their questions and experiences and to have some fun. And if we do that, I think we might even change some lives today. Last thing, in case anyone wandered in here by accident, I think it's worth mentioning that the basic principle of open book management is this. You hear a lot of business owners say, I wish I could get my employees to behave like owners. Well, if you bring them into the conversation, if you help them understand what really drives the success of the business, you may find you have better ideas bubbling up from the front than those you've been trying to impose from the top. And should you choose to start down this path, there are a bunch of options available to you that include giving employees a stake in the outcome and maybe even some actual ownership. But none of this is easy, and it's definitely not for everyone. So without further ado, I want to start by asking each of our skeptics what their biggest concern is. What's keeping them from opening their books? Because they've all thought about it a little bit. Dana, let me start with you. Make sure you're not muted. What's your biggest concern?
So I have started or have tried an open book management system with my staff. At the time, pre-COVID, I had a staff of 19 people, and it has been successful with my operations manager. However, what I've learned in sharing it, I've learned that it's not necessarily a fit for everyone depending on the industry you're in, and depending on what, when you look at your staff, the culture might be there with your team. But if you're working with people who have, some life challenges or just aren't there for the business mindset, it's really hard to open up your balance sheet and your profit and loss and explain it. They'll see it and say, oh, well, you're making this. Why aren't you paying me more? And even when we answered that question, it was because of their life situation that said, you know what, I know you have bills to pay and I know you have to grow this business, but I work for you. I want more of that. And no matter how many ways we try to explain it to them, we found that opening our books can cause some resentment and some questioning as to how we're running the business. And even though we were open, we found that it didn't really help the morale of the company. It was fine to do it amongst managers, right? But when it went to our day-to-day operations with people, it wound up not helping as much as we had hoped.
I suspect that's a concern a lot of people who come to this share. William, how about you? What's your biggest concern?
Well, maybe I just have a fear of the unknown, Lauren. There are a lot of smart people that do open book, and they seem to be doing really well. I got good speakers today. So I don't know that I have the answer for everyone, but I think that right now I have the best answer for our situation. Some of that may be baggage that I'm carrying from having worked in a form of open book in my prior life. My prior career was actually senior pastor of fairly good sized churches. And in the type of church that we were, everything was open book, including the compensation of every pastor to a congregational vote every year, every line item, how much on books, how much on vacation, how much time. And it while it sounds like a transparent thing that, quote, the stockholders should get to vote on, it made it very hard to keep people engaged. Where we were supposed to be a cause-based business, you'd find people, being envious, and you'd like to think that pastors don't act that way, but they do. And not only was it open book for our company, but it was open book for the world. Everything was on the internet. So it was pretty shocking to work in that system. And so maybe I'm just dealing with scar tissue from what I felt to be overly transparent.
Well, it's not like you're just imagining these concerns. You have some experience in this area. Could you give us an example? What went wrong?
Well, it was like a bad annual physical. I mean, it was just for everyone to see. It was just not a fun experience. And then when we try and hire people, they could see why are you paying the older guy who's been here longer but isn't doing nearly as much as I am more than what I'm getting? So the decision making had to be driven by the dollar. And as now in my current career as an owner, I'm finding as a startup, now we're 12 years old, so it's not a complete startup, but I make decisions for the good of the business that don't always make sense for the immediate P&L. And if everyone in my company is looking at everything on the P&L and say, why in the world are we doing that? That doesn't make sense. Now I've got a bunch of people who are acting like owners when they're not. The freshest example, we do searches for all kinds of faith-based teams. So we help churches find their pastors. So that's one of the things we do. Recently, there was a pastor who's about 5 years old, 4 small kids. He'd just given a sermon on helping being the good Samaritan, helping the guy on the side of the road. A couple of nights later, he's driving down the side of the road, sees a car pulled over, stops to help them, is trying to repair their car, gets hit by a truck. The whole thing catches on flames. He's pulling people out of this other car that he doesn't know. He ends up dying. He's widowed, right? She's now a widow with 4 small children. It's a tiny little church. They would never be able to afford help finding a new pastor, and they're decimated. And I said, we're doing this search and we're not charging them a nickel. And if everything were open books, I guarantee you I'd have somebody saying, but what about the P&L? It's those kinds of, as an owner, the ability to still make highly agile decisions. Now, I'll be quiet in just a second, recovering preacher, I ramble, but I have an advantage. The currency of our company is our cause. It's why people come to work here. It's why they're engaged. It's why they say it's a fun place to be, a meaningful, significant place to be. Not all businesses are based in a cause for a higher good. Totally understand that. But for us, I read through all of the advantages of open books: higher employer engagement, more fun in the office, more frontline with customers. All of that for us goes back to our cause and not to our dollar bottom line. So maybe it's baggage from my past. Maybe it's that we're cause-based and not so dollars-based. But for us right now, it's just not the decision I want to make.
I think part of what I'm hearing from you, William, is you're doing okay with what you're doing. Opening the books seems like a big, risky adventure that you don't have a compelling reason to to try right now.
Well, and Lauren, I should say, it also seems like a one-way street.
Meaning?
There's no going back once you open them. Not unless you want to start over with your staff. And it's interesting, I was preparing for this, one of the big competitive advantages of open book is that you're going to be forced to keep your books so well that when investors want to come and look at your company as a potential purchase, they're going to say, oh, everything's kept so well. And that's usually the big stop on purchases. Well, that's fine and well, but investors may not want to buy an open book company. And I don't know how they undo that once they buy it. So I've said enough. Sorry.
Well, those are all good points, and we're going to try to hit all of them. Jay Goltz, I know you've known Jack Stack for years. You've actually sent people to a gathering of games. You've given this real thought. You've never been able to pull the trigger, or gotten to the point where you wanted to pull the trigger, I should say. Tell us what stopped you.
Oh, I did send 3 people down there, and I have an unusual business in that I've got everything from 40 factory workers who make, $15, $16, $17 an hour. I have managers making $60, $80, $100,000 a year. I've got salespeople making 50. So I've got a big range of salaries and job responsibilities. And I think you started this with a false choice of, you have to get people to act like owners. When they put money in the business, when we lose money, that's when they'll be owners. I don't need my employees to act like owners. My employees are responsible. I almost never find them doing anything that I wouldn't be doing. I have employees that are fully engaged, to look out for the best interests of the company, and they're really solid, work with kind of employees. So I don't have an issue with that. The problem, but I have played around with the open book theories, because it does make sense on many levels, and I'm sure it works very well for many companies. But the problem I had with it is, '08, let's talk about my industry. All of my businesses are home furnishing related. We took a 30% hit, and my guys went down to the games probably right after that, or a few years after that, and they came back and said half the people there said they hadn't shown a profit for 5 years, and there was no sharing of any money. How demoralizing. And I had been living through that myself with, I decided I was going to start doing a bonus plan based upon profits. And I used to just give it per year. If you got $25 a year, if you were there 20 years, you got a $500 bonus. If you were there 2 years, you got $50. So I abandoned that and went to some sort of my own half-assed, game of figuring out profits and handing it out. And every year I dreaded going to the last meeting of the year, go, listen, guys, we really didn't make the money we thought we were going to make. We can't give you a raise. We can't give you a bonus this year. And I dreaded it. And then finally, a few years ago, I decided to go back to my old method. And I have to tell you, it was this huge albatross off of me. They get their bonus at the end of the year of how long they've been there. Everybody's happy. And I've just decided at the moment, and I'm still open to it, unless someone can convince me otherwise, I've decided that there's 3 things. You could either not do it. Okay, it's working fine. I could do it badly. That would be worse than anything. Why did he get more than I did? And wait, he's got an easier, that would be a disaster. Or I could do it in the best possible way. And I haven't figured out how to get the metrics to work for that. And I've just, for myself, for my business, there's also, and William, I'm right there with every single thing you said, including making decisions. What if I want to buy new trucks because I don't want my trucks to be driving around the city of Chicago all rusted out? The employees go, wait a second, that truck was perfectly good. We could have driven that for another. I didn't get into business to answer to what everybody thinks they should be doing in the business. I'm extremely collaborative. People bring up ideas all the time. I never say, well, thanks for the input, but I own the business. Here's what we're doing. But I don't really want to leave myself open to having 110 people telling me that, oh no, you shouldn't have spent money on that. And you should. I haven't found anything really appealing to it at this point. And I have had people, I've heard people talk about it, and I've heard people say things like, one of them is actually on today. Oh, well, people are surprised how little I make. Okay. That's not the case in my case. When I do well, I do really well. And when I don't do well, I lose a ton of money. I have a hard time believing that someone who's making $33,000 a year is going to be okay with the owner pulling out a lot of money, which begs the question of, how open book is this that we're talking? Does everybody know what the owner actually makes? Someone's running a $10 million business and they're pulling out
let me stop you, Jay.
I want to get to that. Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here. We got 3 people now on the hook to answer a lot of questions. Michael Kilbasa, let me start with you. there's so much to cover, and feel free to go anywhere you want to go. But I would ask you to start with this question: how do you deal with the transparency issue? The idea that people have, I know this was a concern for yours early on, that if people looked at what the numbers really were, that they would run out the door and find a job somewhere else. How have you dealt with people knowing what the real numbers are inside the business?
Well, thank you, Lauren, for asking me to be on this. And I'm listening to Dana and William and Jay talk. I'm nodding my head in agreement more than I thought. It's a risky deal, and really the reason we opened our books was it was, we were growing our business. We're a sausage manufacturer. We were. It was 2013. We had just launched this program called Values-Based Leadership, which is a leadership development program that really puts your mission and your vision and your core values at the center of everything you do. And we were starting to grow really fast. We had been growing around 15% a year, and we started growing 25% a year. And that may not sound like a big difference, but it really stretched all of our systems and processes. And I had two conversations going on in our business, and we were profitable. Don't get me wrong. We were making money, but when you're growing 25% a year, you need to be making the margin necessary to finance that growth. And if you don't, you're going to have to leverage your balance sheet to finance that growth. So I had two conversations going on with my senior managers at this time. One was, hey, Michael, we need to start building a new plant to keep up with our growth. And the one going on in my head was, hey, we need to start building cash. And I had to bridge that gap somehow. And so I reached out to Vern Harnish, actually. Some of y'all may know Vern, and he led me to the Great Game of Business. And we opened up our books, and it was a very scary moment for me. I mean, transparency is not easy. But I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I really needed to teach people how the business made money and why cash flow, forget profit, why cash flow is so important. And the moment I opened up the books, I did it with at the time, we probably had 150 employees. I brought in the top 30 managers, including my senior team. And I said, okay, here's reality, guys. This is what we're making. This is how much cash we're generating every year. And it's not enough to keep up with our growth. We got to figure out how to do this. And I went from being a boss that was acting like I was letting them make decisions, but I was really making them all, to giving them the information and becoming a coach to allow them to learn how the business makes money and generate cash. We've gone through, so that was 7 or 8 years ago. We've gone through, a lot of peaks and valleys during that period. Opening up your books is not a panacea. It's a commitment, but we've, grown the business 5x over the last 8 years. But the most important part of that is we've grown the bottom line about 10x. And so that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the alignment within my organization over how we make money and generate cash. And so it's been a very powerful program for us. William, to your point, I think we're a little bit unique in the Great Game of Business community. I don't know that we're totally unique, but I think that having the values-based culture and the foundation of that really accelerated the adoption of the Great Game principles without having a lot of the drama associated with it. We do not share individual salaries. We are beginning to share the balance sheet and teach the balance sheet to our team members. That's a very complex element of this. And so we've been we've been doing that for about a year now. And so you do have to explain dividends and distributions and things like that. But I'm confident that, and we have enough trust built in our organization to where people understand the concept of that. And so it's been it's been a very successful endeavor for us.
Michael,
Can I jump?
let me just ask a question. Michael, do you feel like you have people looking over your shoulder? Do they challenge you on, like Jay's example, buying a truck or something like that?
Well, I would say they challenged me in a good way. I'll tell you a quick story. We were, this was about a year after we adopted the Great Game of Business, and we had lost an HR person. Well, we had, an HR person had come to me and said, I need help. And I said, do you want help above you or below you? And she said, no, I'd rather have someone come in above me to help. And so I went out on a search to find somebody. I found a very capable person to help. And I brought it to my senior team, and we had vetted this person out. We were getting ready to pull the trigger on bringing her on. And I said to my senior team, tell me what the guys on the floor are saying about this, bringing in so-and-so. And my VP of engineering said, do you really want to know? And I said, yeah, I really want to know. And he said, the guys in the maintenance room want to know why we're adding overhead when we're not making our budget numbers yet. I said, wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty good question. Sounds like my father. Anyway, we pulled the trigger on. I mean, we pulled back on it, and we did not hire her, and we lost the person that had come to me and said she needed some help, but we managed through it, and it was a very positive and powerful experience because it told me that the guys on, at least in the maintenance room, really understood how important it is to generate EBITDA and cash flow.
I have to say, what you've described is not necessarily open book management. It was not good management till you went to better management, that you had a bunch of managers that didn't know all of my managers do see what the numbers are. And the fact that the guys in the machine room decided that you shouldn't hire what? Maybe you would have gotten sued for not keeping track. Maybe you haven't seen the rest of that movie yet. Maybe you think you came out ahead, but maybe you really did need an HR person. What you've just told me is you have delegated running the company to the guys in the machine room. And I don't see what that has to do with open book management. They told you don't spend the money on something that they really don't have the facilities to understand what an HR person really does, and the lawsuits and the legal responsibilities and on all of that. So that's not helping me with saying, oh, this is a good idea.
Well, I appreciate it, Jay, but really what it did is it challenged our own systems and processes for bringing on additional headcounts. And especially it challenged me to think about the HR role and what we really needed. I've been over my history. I've been very quick to bring in people, and they just challenged it. And I actually give them a lot of credit for challenging me. A friend of mine told me who is one of the most successful business people I've ever been around, said and I believe in this, he said the secret to being successful is surrounding yourself with really smart people and then telling them where you want to go and then get out of the way. And so, I do not consider myself the smartest guy in the room in our company by any stretch of the imagination.
Did the people in the machine room ask you what the responsibilities of that job were, so they understood what they were nixing? Did they say to you, explain to us why you think you need to, did they go through that conversation with you?
Well, we explained that the reason we were hiring is just one HR person felt overwhelmed and they needed help. And their response was, well, let's get rid of her and go find somebody that can take her job. And
did you do that?
That's what we ended up doing, rather than adding a head count.
Chris McKee, I want to bring you into this. You have an accounting firm. You have accountants who presumably, without open book management, had a pretty good feel for how the company was going. I'm curious, how did the transparency change things for you at an accounting firm?
Yeah, I'll say, a lot of the things that the other folks have said really resonate. When I actually became aware of the Great Game of Business probably 5 years before we implemented it, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, that can't work for us. I was like,
Why? What were you thinking?
well, like Michael, I was worried that they would be shocked at how little money we were making. And we were doing fine financially, but we were mostly marginally profitable. And there was a lot of opportunity for improvement there. And we felt as we grew as an organization, most of what we were trying to do to improve profitability and improve performance was to run around and tell people, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. And that was just becoming not at all scalable, and it wasn't having an impact. And for us, our gross margin and profitability didn't really change in those years leading up to implementing the Great Game of Business. So I finally, after trying everything else, I went with the Great Game. I went with opening the books completely and the Great Game of Business. And I would say that to put a little shameless plug in for the methodology with the Great Game of Business is we brought in a coach and took our team through their process, and it helped a ton with educating people and preparing them for being aware of, like, what does profit really mean? Some of the things that Michael talked about. What are these dividends, and how does this? And, we have found that they really, after going through that process, they really understand that we've got to be profitable as a company to invest in the future and to protect their jobs. And it actually brought them a real comfort level, at least I think, I'm going to speak for my team, in knowing that we were profitable and that they could have an impact on that profitability. So, and I just haven't seen a lot of the issues I feel like I do have 40 people running the company now. Where they're really having an impact are on the things that they do every day. How can we be more efficient and effective? Efficient in terms of efficient with our processes, and therefore leading to more profitability, and effective in terms of creating a better experience for our clients, and therefore retaining our clients and helping us grow as a company. And so, I don't know, those are some of the things that kind of came out of it for me, but I resisted for a long time for some of those same reasons. And once I kind of got past that, we've tried everything else. And since then, it really has made a huge impact on, similar to what Michael talked about, on profitability. I don't feel like I've got 40 bosses. I feel like I've got 40 fellow leaders or 45 fellow leaders really helping me run the company. And it's just been a huge weight off of my shoulders from that perspective. So.
Do your people know what everybody makes?
No, we don't reveal salaries. They know broadly. We have categories of salaries like the cost of goods sold salaries that are related to client delivery, and then sales and marketing salaries, G&A salaries. So very broad categories. And, and frankly, we are a little mindful when we're adding G&A salaries about the transparency of that, and it really causes us to make to ask ourselves, if I were an average employee in this organization, how would this appear to me? And I think it makes us think about it more mindfully and make better decisions, and also explain those decisions to the team as well, and give them a context for those decisions that we're making. So far in 3 years, I think it's been very collaborative, and I think we've had some decision points in the company where having that sort of thought process and even some of those conversations has held us a little more accountable to some of the decisions that we're making. And some we've moved forward with, and some we've pulled back with, like Michael's talked about. So I think that's even brought more credibility to the open book process for us, is that process of really listening to the team.
How much does the average person make that works for you there?
That's a great question. It's obviously going to be more than in your situation.
Like multiple times more. Is it
Yeah,
$80,000?
I don't know if it's quite that high. I think it's probably more in the 60s, but sure, it's going to be a little bit more. And hey, look, we have an advantage in that we are an accounting firm, so people have some financial literacy. But some of my folks are on the call, so they're going to probably be upset for me telling the story on them. But just before we showed them the P&L, we asked the team, how much money do you think we're making top line and bottom line revenue? And then how much of that is making it to the bottom line, like net income? And my team is accountants, and they're very conversant with financials. And at the time, we were roughly a $4.5 million company, and we had and about probably 35 folks, and we had guesses anywhere from revenue of $500,000 to $50 million, and net income of $250,000 to $25 million. And so there was a thought that I was potentially making maybe $25 million a year. And so, even accountants opening the books really gave them much more of a perspective, and they see clients' financials every day. But everyone thought that 50% of revenue was dropping to the bottom line, whether it was $500,000 or $50 million. So I think the education process has got to occur regardless, and I think people are capable of learning. So.
Chris, that's a great point. Jack Stack always talks about how, when people ask him, say to him, I don't want people in the company to know how much we're making. He says, believe me, they already assume you're making way more than you really are. And if that was true at an accounting firm, you can imagine it being true elsewhere. Bob Schwartz, I want to get to you and Super Suds. You have a particularly interesting situation, and to some extent, I think you could address the issue Jay was bringing up about the salaries and the levels of employees. You have a Wall Street background. You bought a chain of laundromats. It's not an obvious, target for open book management. I don't think. You have multiple locations, employees who aren't paid a lot of money. What attracted you to it?
Yeah, thanks for including our company in this. I really appreciate it. The background, real quick, was a Wall Street background years ago. So I came from a financial background. I understood numbers. I was the deal guy, right? Investment banker. But what I learned out of frustration and ignorance was there's a big difference between owning a business or investing in a business and operating a business, And at the end of the day, after 20 some years of different stuff, I got frustrated with the operating side. I didn't consider myself a great operator, a great manager necessarily. I thought I was a pretty good deal person. But like I said, there's a big difference. And so I think couple things that I wanted to bring out to everybody here and some comments was, one, I think open book management is just one piece of it, right? Sharing the numbers is just a piece of the great game. You could say it's the foundation, but there's so much more to it than just sharing numbers. There's the engagement. I think one of the things that personally what I found is the level of trust. Speed is trust. And so there's other components to the great game, just in addition, just sharing numbers, from huddles. People trust you, our employees trust each other. It's not easy. It's not a panacea. It takes a lot of hard work. But our performance has been, remarkable since we've done this. And it's, you don't have to share the salaries like Chris has said. You don't, there's just, you can create open book any way you want to meet the needs of the company. So you don't have to share what you make personally, but you're still getting the same effect. You're getting buy-in, you're getting trust, you're getting alignment.
Well, let me stop you there for a second. Don't your employees have some sense of how much money you're taking out of the business if the books are open?
Yeah, they have some sense, but they, as a result, there's a level of trust, I believe, that they have with what we're doing, that at the end of the day, human nature is, people want to be part of a team. They want to be included. They want to be heard. They want to be felt, right? And, at the end of the day, they're not pointing fingers at the owner and saying, oh, look at him. They may have been prior to doing this, but now that we've opened it up, they don't, I don't share specifically, my CFO knows basically, obviously, what I make, but you don't have to bring it down to the hourly wage person to know what I'm bringing home to get the same effect of open book management. I don't think that makes sense.
And why do you think opening the books improved the performance of the company? What difference did it make?
Oh, it's just because everybody is all of a sudden. I'll give you simple examples. I mean, we have 20. Anytime we have somewhere between 25 to 30 stores, depending upon what we're doing or selling or building. So a lot of our, it's a big CapEx business. We have utilities are a big component of it, right? So we have all these locations, all these stores, and it sounds crazy, but just to the very simple level, our store staff or store team members are responsible for, the P&L at each store. And a big driver of that is utilities. So prior to this, the doors were left open, waters, it just goes on and on. The utility costs were through the roof. The minute we started saying, okay, here's the deal, here's our P&L at this store, bonuses are tied to the profitability, all of a sudden it's like the light switch comes on, and it's amazing what people will do to tighten down the hatches and to drive profit. It's just human nature. I don't know how else to say it. They're shutting off running water valves or closing their doors or not running the AC all the time. It goes on and on and on. And, after 3 or 4 years, it really adds up.
Bob, you're as you said, a deal guy. You bought Super Suds with the idea that you would probably flip it. I wonder if you would address William's concern about what it would mean if you were looking to sell the business at some point, having gone down the open book road.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That was one of my problems is I got into business and I enjoy running it now, but I didn't at first. But now I'm like, okay, how do I get out of this thing? And what's my exit strategy? And everybody's different. Everybody's personal story is different. In my case, I've made the decision that I want to continue to operate the business. My plan is to create an ESOP out of it. We'll be the first in the entire industry to do it, as far as I know. So there's a way for me to exit through an ESOP, right? Which I was not even aware of until I got into this whole great game thing. So it's created an exit strategy for me that I was not aware of. At the end of the day, financial buyers care about, if you're going to sell it to a financial buyer, strategic buyer, they care about what your profit and loss is, what kind of return you're getting. And if it's open book and it's driving numbers, all the better, I think. They're gonna buy what you're selling, and you're selling an open book, that's fine. Now, if you don't have to create an open book, like Jay, you don't, if you're happy running the business the way you're running it, for me, it was a personal decision to create a better operating structure at the end of the day. That's my decision. I just needed a better way to operate my business.
I'm curious. I think I've heard from Bob, Michael, and Chris something along the lines of what we were doing wasn't working. Especially Chris, you were saying that you had thought about this for years. You tried everything else, and this was kind of a last resort. For someone like William or Jay or anyone who's looking at this and thinking, it's going pretty well the way it is, what would you say to somebody like that who doesn't have the, driving motivation of turning around something that's not quite working?
Some of what I've heard is we had bad management. We had employees that weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. We have managers that had no clue how much money we were making, and that this fixed all that. Okay, well, to me, that's a false choice. There's good management, there's bad management, and there's the great game of business, which is a form of good management. I don't know that one needs to jump to the great game of business to start practicing good management, which is Bob, in your case, why is the air conditioning on, and why is the faucet on, and why is the door wide open? To me, that's management. Like, why did it take having to put the great game of business in to have a manager who knows to shut the door, turn off the air conditioning, and turn off the water, and the other 1,000 things that managers are supposed to be doing? I found that you can get people to act like responsible managers without doing this, and that there's some downsides to doing this that at the moment, and I'm still open to it, believe it or not, I look at some of the downsides and I say to myself, it's just not worth all the energy, the downsides. And for those of you that are in bigger, I would just look at someone with a $10 million business and say, if somebody's pulling $600,000 out of the business, how do you either hide that in the financials if you're truly open book and they see management and they see that number? Someone's going to go, oh, that's okay. He deserves 600 grand. He put all the risk into it and he's been working at it for 30 years. And when he loses money, I don't put it. I just don't know that I want to open myself up to having to explain why the owner of a business should be making a return on investment and what it should be.
It's funny because even in
go ahead, Dana.
Even that, we don't practice open book management with the entire staff, and I do it with my manager. Everybody on my staff knows what everybody makes. We have that open book, right? And they know, because I'm young and the business is young, Dana's not pulling out anything. But I believe when the time comes and it's time for me to draw a salary from my business, I know not to disclose that. Just like I know not to pull up to the salon in the Cadillac, you pull up in the Pontiac, right? And that's having a culture. I think it's just an industry. I don't know if it's a salon industry because they're used to being independent contractors and they're not at Fairleigh Boyd. But I just think it's interesting how there's open book manager, but we don't really talk about what everybody makes. Versus, we tried to practice it. It really, hurt the business as far as how people interact with each other. But everybody knows what everybody makes. Just an interesting flip on it.
Hey, Lauren, I'd like to jump in and address Jay's point about bad management versus good management. Look, we have mostly the same people that we had before we implemented the great game of business. We've got a lot of tenured folks. Going open book management, whether it's through the great game of business or some other methodology, has made them better managers, better leaders, better team members, because now they can see a lot more how the business all fits together and works and how they can have an impact. And so, and quite frankly, they're better at servicing our clients as well, because the things that our team has learned in learning how our business works teaches them how to talk with our clients about how their businesses work, because we do the accounting for our clients. So I think that's, for us, we've got all the same people. It's just, this has really helped us help educate them and take them to the next level. They were already really smart, effective people, but it's an additional tool that's helped them grow.
Yeah, Chris, I would second that. By this education of the financials, we've created some managers that have become really good, that maybe weren't as financially sophisticated as they were prior, to the point now we're creating some other vertical businesses within Supersides, unrelated stuff that I'm going to, that they're going to manage, which they couldn't have. Honestly, they probably weren't prepared to do it 5 years ago. Look how many businesses SRC has. What do they have? Like 50 or 60 or something?
The point is, there's a big bandwidth. I'm doing some of I'm probably doing half of what the great game of business is about. I am showing them.
Wait a second, Jay.
A third, a quarter, some part. I'm not suggesting keep everyone in the dark. It's when you start tying. So I want to get to a specific point. It gets down to tying their compensation to how the company's doing. So my question is, and maybe some of you don't have businesses that ever have bad times. For those of you that have had periods.
That's not the case.
Okay. If for those of you that have had periods where the company just didn't make money for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, do you feel it added a different level of stress to yourself or to your employees? Because I have to tell you, the second I handed out I'm telling you, I felt like the weight of the world was off of me. I handed out my yearly bonus thing, and everybody was happy, and I was happy, and I felt like I felt liberated. So what do you do about that when you're not making money for years?
Michael, maybe you could address this. To what extent do your employees profit more when the company does better, and how big an issue is it if the company has a tough time?
Well, they've got a direct line of sight to whether the company's doing well or not, which kind of demystifies the whole process. I want to jump back to something that maybe I think William brought it up, or maybe it was Jay. We're a branded sausage business, and so when you're building a brand, you're making investments in that don't necessarily translate into profits right away. Whether it's going into a new market, whether it's introducing a new product line, whether it's beginning a relationship with a new customer. I mean, that takes investments. And for years, we had a real disconnect in our business because we were bonusing off of EBITDA. And what I was trying to do is really build brand value, which is two different dynamics. And it really caused a lot of stress in the organization. And it wasn't an easy conversation, but I had to spend a lot of time coaching people on the importance of the brand value. But we have made, I guess, with the addition of a really great CFO who's come in and helped as we've grown the business, we've been able to really gel around EBITDA and get to a performance standard for a brand. So we just got through paying almost $1 million out in bonuses to our team members it was for the past 6 months. And I cannot tell you the excitement. And they knew what was coming because they saw the financials every month. But they were just, you can't imagine the excitement. And going back to Bob's comment around trust, the transparency of the great game of business. And the great game of business is simply an operating system that uses open book management as part of the tool. And that's very important to understand. It's an operating system. So if you try to do open book management, you can do open book management several different ways. It sounds like, Bob, you're doing it, to a certain extent. Maybe Dana, you're doing it to a certain extent. But the great game business is a specific operating system that we recommitted to actually back in 2017. And since we've recommitted to it, it's been an amazing journey. But the transparency of the great game of business magnified the trust in our organization, which unleashed creativity in every area of our business. Create much more creativity than me or even my whole senior team could unleash. And that, to me, is the secret sauce that makes businesses successful, is the creativity.
So Michael, to the point of challenging your employees, challenging your decisions, you had a tough decision last year where you walked away from a very big client of yours, which might have been a tough decision to explain. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm going to talk about a gut-wrenching decision so we just spent about $4 million adding capacity to our business. We added a new production line and increased our capacity about 50%. Right after we did that, our third biggest customer came to us and said, "Hey, that branded product that you make that we sell, well, we want to convert it to a private label product, and we want you to make it." And I said, "Well, we really don't do private label. We don't co-man. We're a branded company." And the buyer said, "Well, if you don't do it, I'm going to get somebody else to do it." So I had to go to our team and say, "Look, okay, what do you want to do here? Let's talk about this." Because again, I'm not the smartest guy in the room here. I want to get everybody involved in this. And, we quickly understood that although this guy was our third biggest customer and had 20% of our business. It was our lowest gross profit margin customer. And we really didn't need to replace the top line dollars associated with this. We had to replace the gross profit associated with this. And so that became a much different conversation over how we could replace the gross profit associated with this. And it made the conversation and the decision much easier for us to make. As a result of that, I mean, we still walked away. We had to replace that business, but it was an educated and we call it holding hands in our business. It was a chance for us to hold hands on a strategy to actually become more profitable than we would have had we maybe not framed the conversation in terms of gross profit.
So how many people were in that meeting that you discussed that with? The whole company?
No. Probably initially it was the top 7 team members in my organization. So I call them my senior team. But then we took that conversation down to our mid-level managers, which are about 5 people, and explained it to them and got their input. And they all agreed that, look, let's go chase after the lost gross profit.
See, I do that exact same thing.
Replace this business with more profitable business.
No, I do the exact same thing. So that's where I'm struggling with. That's what any good company would do. They talk to their key people and have that conversation. I don't know what that has to do with having a great game of business down to the guy in the loading dock. Any good company would have that conversation. So I don't think this is all or nothing. I don't think this is great game of business or you don't tell anybody anything. I think there's somewhere in between. And I just want to ask you, the $1 million bonus, what percentage of profit was that?
It was about 15%.
Okay.
And Jay, you have those conversations, but when you've opened the books and really educated them about the business, those conversations, I think that's part of Michael's point. The conversation was a different conversation because they understood the business a little bit better rather than, well, gosh, we just need to keep every customer at all costs. If they don't really have that perspective on the financials, some of these decisions are the feedback that you get is not as informed because they just don't have the context. And I think that's where it's part of Michael's point is you just get better decisioning all the way down to the loading dock. It's not just about asking them; it's about giving them the tools to actually help you.
So
William, I wanted to go back to you, William. I hate to call BS on a former pastor, but we're friends. You'll let me do it, right? When you gave the example of the church that you wanted to help out without charging them because their pastor had died being a good Samaritan, I have a hard time believing that your employees would struggle with that. I know you've hired people who are looking for a larger cause. I think they probably would have been okay with that. So I don't think that's the real reason you've shied away from doing this. I'm curious if you're hearing anything here that's making you think about it at all.
Yeah. So Lauren, we're all in sales here, right? Everyone on this call. So I picked the easiest example.
Okay.
But the underlying principle is the same. And it was a question I'd like to raise with Michael's example. This is a fascinating decision you had to go through, Michael. Props to you for getting through it, and makes me want to go buy your sausage over at HEB unless they were the customer.
They were not the customer.
So props to you, but what happens? So two-layered question. One's actually just selfish. I'm curious to know, of that senior leadership table that you have, Michael, your family-run business, were any of those people related to you in any way?
No, none of them were related.
Okay, that clears a lot up because we work with a lot of we're a family business. We get a lot. So where does that come into everybody knowing what's going on? And that's a whole different, whole different onion peel. Jay, to me, I'm really not the smartest guy on this call. I am truly a recovering pastor that's just trying to figure out how to run a business. And what has served me well over the years are some gut level decisions that really didn't make sense at the time. And to me, that sounds like a non-data driven reason to not be open books. But to me, there are times where I've got a friend who is a pastor of a very large church, and he was talking about his compensation and retirement and such. And he said to me, William, I don't think they pay me to preach anymore. And I said, what do you mean, Mark? And he said, yeah, the preaching's fine. I like doing it. It's kind of for free. But where I earn my salary, I get paid to make about 4 decisions a year no one else wants to make. And you can be as open as you want, but sometimes the owner makes a call that's going to go against the grain of what everyone else thinks or believes. Now, maybe you're in a purely data-driven business. Maybe you're more mature as a business. I mean, Michael, your business has been around a long time. Way to go for being open, almost 70 years or a little more. That's a long time. So you've got a lot of data. We're young, things shift, things change, and we have to decide during the pandemic, what are we going to do? Churches and schools have been closed. That's put a little bit of a damper on our business. So we've had to make some pretty hard decisions, some of which we've done very similarly to what I've heard the panelists that are pro open books do. But at the end of the day, the decision is with the people who have the name on the door. And Lauren, I'm not getting more convinced. If anything, I'm more convinced of my position. I think what I'm learning is open books doesn't have to be telling everybody what everybody makes. That's a big deal. But what I'm also learning is the things I'm hearing, which are super good practices in the companies using open books, are things we're doing anyway, but we're driving our conversations by our values. And I do have people that have worked their fingers to the bone during a time when we've been down in business. And for me to say, we're going to take on a search, which is a big, tall order. We sell big widgets, not little ones. And nobody's going to make anything, but you still need to work just as hard. Like, that's just not going to go well, even if it's the Good Samaritan getting killed. Now, I did pick the easiest decision, so valid call on me. But whether it's that decision or another, there are, through the history of our company, a number of times where we've done the thing that's counterintuitive, and it's been our best decision.
I hear you.
There's
Bob,
did you see the question here? I'd be interested to hear the panel's take on sharing specific financial performance metrics versus totally open book management. Can you get the benefit without the downside? I believe so. That's kind of my whole point. I think
Totally agree.
most of what you're talking about, I do all of that. I can't think of one time in 42 years where I had my key people sit around at a table. They gave me their opinion and I said, thanks for the input, but here's what we're doing. It's my business. I totally am doing all that stuff. It's the connecting it to income that I choke on, because I think that's where it just adds a whole new layer of potential problems that I don't want to accept.
Chris McKee, you not only have a window into your own business, but you're an accountant. You talk to lots of other businesses. Maybe you could deal with that question that Jay just read off the screen. Do you know what the question is?
Yeah, we had considered just opening the books, and in fact, for a number of years, considered just opening them down to gross margin. And that is our critical number in great game of business parlance, which is what our bonus is based off of. And I think that's something that's very doable. So you could open up down to a certain level, and everybody and gross margin for us is sort of the thing that everyone has line of sight to, or ability to impact the most in all the little decisions they make every day. And that's really the piece that's changed the most for us. So I would say it's a process that everybody's got to go through when they're implementing the open book management, however they decide to do it. And that piece of it has been really impactful. We decided to go ahead and open all the way down to the bottom line because we really wanted people to understand the context in which we were operating in and why it was important perhaps to generate more gross margin beyond the theory that there's a lot of other bills that you've got to pay. We really wanted to understand kind of how the rest of it fits together as well. But I don't think it's an absolute requirement. I'd say the only difference really when we used to just open the books down to gross margin, we were bonusing people off the gross margin that they were generating. We were organized in little teams and we were bonusing based on gross margin by team. And we were finding some teams that were doing great and some teams that were doing not so great. And in the end, the company it didn't move the needle for the company at all. It was just, we were paying out bonuses to people that were already doing well and not to people that needed help and that kind of thing. And so what it really moved into the Great Game of Business methodology sort of pulled that all together, and we all began to working together much more as a team. But I do think there could be situations where you open the books down to a certain point and you design your bonus structure to create movement around that number. And you don't have to necessarily open all the way to the bottom line and show owner's compensation. And if that's a big piece of the heartburn, I think there is an opportunity to consider that. So,
if you're a sole owned business and you show all the way down to your bottom line, how do you not show owner's compensation?
Yeah, no, I agree. But, I think there's an education process that goes on with that. Money doesn't all just sort of go into my pocket, if you will. And we do have several other owners within the company, but I'm still the majority owner. But they understand, we've educated them about, look, we have to finance receivables, I don't get to just take all that money out every day at the end of the day and write myself a big check. There's cash flow demands of the business. And maybe my team understands that a little better because they're accountants, or it was easier for them to figure out. But I know by going through that education process, they understand why a business needs to show a profit at the end of the day. And sometimes it's a substantial profit because there's going to be difficult times where you've got to be able to dig into that profit as well. So.
That's super well said, Chris. One of the things that my wife and I have talked about this a number of times, and we've talked with a lot of other entrepreneurs. And one thing that keeps coming up is, if we were a publicly traded company and we had just call it a small number, 100,000 shares out there with 500 owners, and there was a rock bottom line that was getting split among shareholders, I don't think employees would have a problem with that. But when it's one shareholder, they do. And that's what I keep hearing over and over, whether it's a $1 million business or a $10 million, is if there is only one stockholder and you're running the business at healthy margins that would be appealing to somebody like Bob, if you were coming to do a deal, well, I'm not going to buy that business if they're only making 1% a year, but I'd buy them if assuming healthy margins in one owner. I don't know how every business can say open books is good categorically. And I think it might be great for some. I think, gosh, Bob, as thinking about ESOP, this makes total sense. I mean, wow, that's perfect for us and where we are in our life as a company. It just doesn't. And maybe I'm wrong.
So here's the question. Open book management. Everyone's given their opinion. I'd like to know officially from someone that works for the Great Game of Business. Open book management to me has always meant open book management. All the numbers are out there. And now I'm told, well, no, not necessarily. It doesn't have to. So what is it? Is it the employees? Is it the owner's salary? Or is it not? Because I could take an $800,000 salary and leave $100,000 profit and go, yeah, we're barely making money. So I'd like a clarification on that.
Jay, I think I can answer that. No one has ever said it associated with the Great Game of Business that salaries have to be included. Chris McKee, am I right about that? I think he nodded.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I did nod. Sorry, I forgot that not everybody can see me. Yeah, no, we don't. And again, I do think that, and I will if somebody from the Great Game of Business does want to jump in and sort of verify that, it's tailored to every company's needs. You go through an implementation process. And you and the team help design how open book management is going to work for your company. And I think there's ways that it can be tailored for the situations that the three of y'all have that are kind of holding back a little bit, that can address some of those concerns.
Bob Schwartz, I wanted to ask you.
I'm sorry. We have a saying, adapt versus adopt, the great game of business. So that helps.
Nice. Yes.
Thank you, Donna. Bob Schwartz, I wanted to ask you maybe to address a point William made earlier about what it's like doing this through a down period.
Yeah.
I don't actually know for sure, but I'm guessing this has been a tough year for a chain of laundromats. I assume you had to be closed for a while. What has it been like for you with your employees?
Yeah, no, I was gonna address that. And I would encourage people to talk to or look at Anthony Wilder. It's a construction company. I think Jay, you said you're in the home business as well.
He has a home store. It's
store.
A retail business.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when the times are tough is when you want to be doing this at the end of the day, you know, because, well, two things. Number one, let me just step back real quickly and talk about the bonus, because I think people are getting hung up on that. And, you know, we used to sit around. I mean, you talk about Wall Street is like the exact opposite of this, right? So they'd sit around, everybody's wait around for their bonus. And that's how I kind of ran this business, and sit around and say, okay, these guys are going to make this. And you hand out the checks at the end of the year. It was, the line of sight was me, Bob, not the company. And so when you flip it and create an open book, however you want to structure it, it doesn't, you don't, you know, like they said, adapt, you know, versus, you know, adopt versus adapt or whatever. It's just, you can fit the P&L to the type of business you want for the bonus that you want to get. Ultimately, you want to get line of sight of your employees. Now, when times are tough, right, is really, I think, when you want to do it. Now, come March, we were sweating it because there was, you know, we're in 5 different states, and every state had a different view as what's considered essential business. And so, fortunately, we were considered essential, which means we stayed open. But what happened to us, and I didn't bring it up, I had many employees come to me and say, do we need to take a pay cut? I'm willing to take a pay cut, defer my bonus. Okay, that would never have happened. Never have happened. You know, it would always been me making a tough decision. And now the tables are turned because people generally understand how we operate, and they have a level of trust that we're going to do the right thing by them, right? And they want to stay in this in the long term. Can you do it without great game? I'm sure you can. It's just, it was a better operating system for me to run it this way. And especially when times are tough, you want to be transparent to people. You want, they'll come to the right decision, I believe, at the end of the day, if you're open with them.
Michael, I think I saw you nodding your head. Does it work for you in tough times?
Yeah, I mean, when we walked away from that 20% of our business, our volume, after we just added 50% capacity, we were able to really engage everybody throughout the organization on how do we reduce costs to get through this, because we didn't replace that gross profit right away. It took time. And so it is what Bob says is exactly right. And I don't want to sound like, you know, I am this is the only way to make it work. I mean, it sounds like Jay and William have great operating systems that can produce the same impact. It's just, it works for our culture. It works for the way I want to run the business. We have aspirations, Bob, as well as you do, for ESOP down the road. So it's setting us up for that option. And so I'm, you know, I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that this is the only way to do it. There's a hell of a lot of successful companies that don't do the open book management, but for our culture and for the way I want to run the business, it's really, it's been very, very effective for us.
I believe that 75% of the great game of business is just called good management. And I think I'm doing the exact same thing many of you were doing. There's that other 25% that, and believe me, there's probably some more I should be doing, and I'm thinking more about it now as usual. and bringing it down to a lower level and having some more meetings on that. So I don't think this is all or nothing. And I'm thrilled to hear your saying of adapt, don't adopt. I'm thrilled to hear that, because I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that somebody could say, gee, we're doing nothing like this, the great game of business. And I think that's a huge problem. I think keeping people in the dark is not an answer. So I think it's a matter of bandwidth. And are you going to do 75%? You're going to do 100%? You're going to do 80%? And after this conversation, I'll probably add another 5%, because I probably could have some more, not probably, I could have some more meetings with my lower level people that frankly I haven't had in 5 years. And it reminded me to do that.
I'm curious. I think we might have some employees of some of the companies represented here. Is there an employee listening to this conversation who has a point they'd like to make about how this has worked for them? Anybody want to raise a hand, wave at us?
I'm Abby. I'll jump in because I can't help myself.
Thanks, Abby. Go for it.
I was raising both hands. This is all just getting me super excited, just hearing different business owners' perspectives, especially on the other side of the fence. But I am very proud to work for Chris McKee at Venturity Financial Partners. And I'm actually on the business development side. So I'm someone at the firm who did not have financial literacy before the great game of business. So I think Chris and the other management team members have created a really great and strong culture at Venturity, where there are just really great people on the team. But now we all understand where we fit in the big puzzle and what the implications of our day-to-day jobs have on the greater success of the business. And not only do we want to be more successful for each other to get bonused, but we are constantly being creative, and we have an infrastructure in place to have weekly team meetings where we get to brainstorm and make an impact on the bigger company. So, you know, Jay, I hear what you're saying on that there's good management and there's bad management. And I've worked for companies that have really bad management. And it's not just the great game of business that is, you know, given Venturity, put Venturity in the good management bucket, but it definitely helps us as employees understand our why, the how we can have an impact, and also quantify and be able to measure what our bonus is going to look like, because on a weekly basis, we see what that number is on the scoreboard. So we're not just waiting for news to come from the top. We're creating our own destiny, and it's really exciting. So I am a huge advocate for the great game of business. I talk about it all the time. I'm sitting here thinking, William, you got to do it. Jay, you got to do it. It's just, it's incredible. And it's really fun as an employee also.
What would you say to William? I don't think you're going to convince him, but I mean, what made you think, William, you got to do it?
Because you can have, I think having a values-driven organization is all the more reason. You owe it, I feel like, to your employees who care, who have good values, to give them a more meaning going to the office every day. So I think it just helps give more meaning and value to employees. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Abby. Any other employees? Maybe an employee from SRC? Anybody else want to jump in and say what it's like from your perspective?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, while you think about it, I just want to say quickly, until you own a business by yourself and have had to borrow against your house when things go bad and work 80 hours a week, I don't believe you're in a position to understand the whole perspective of a business owner, A, and B, unless you make $15 an hour, which a lot of my employees do, I also think that your perspective is not exactly as, so to suggest, oh no, you should do this, I would say, you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe there should be more of it, but I don't think you can put the magic wand on every company should do this, because your perspective is for you. How much money you make in an accounting firm is very different than other kinds of companies. So I absolutely hear what you're saying, and there's some positive things there, but this is not a one size fits all. All right, I'm done.
I respect that, Jay. And I say it with humility of just how much I love it. And so I'm a evangelist in that sense. But I respect that immensely.
Hey, well, real quickly, just to jump on that a little bit, you know, JR, we've got 325 employees. Most of them, about half of them are production workers, hourly workers. to Abby's point about the culture, though, we've been named a top workplace in San Antonio, which I venture to guess there haven't been another sausage manufacturer named a top workplace. This is a truly a cultural thing, and it really needs to tie to your culture, your vision of the culture in your company. I think more than anything, and that's not to say you've got to have an open book culture to be a top workplace. I'm just saying it's culture driven.
That's very impressive. And I have to tell you, your 15% of profits, you know what? That's very impressive. I think that's a solid number. So I was waiting for you to tell me 50% or something. So I fully respect what you're doing there. And frankly, as I told you, I'm absolutely going to dig in again and do more of it. I'm just drawing the line at, I have to think about the
I've heard that before, Jay.
Yeah,
Dana?
No, I just think it's, you can create a great culture, you can have all of that, but I think as a business owner, you have to also know your staff and you have to know what they're dealing with. My staff doesn't want to look at the P&L and figure out, or not even figure out, but be told how they're contributing to it or how not. They want to know how much you're paying me, when am I getting it, and is there a bonus? How much of that are you giving me? That's it. During COVID, and I would be on these, in these Zooms, and everybody's like, oh, we're doing a dueling piano bar happy hour for our staff. And it's not that I work with bad people, but I understand the issues that are facing the women that I'm working with. Single mother of 3 kids, she's okay, so does this mean I'm not getting my check on Friday so I can pay for this, or what does this mean? I'm not working with people who want to be business owners. And even the ones that don't want to operate a salon like Pearly Boyd. They want booth rent, they want commission, they don't want to get into it. And so I'm listening to everybody and just thinking, wow, I just come from a very different culture. And that's why when it did work for me, it turned a lot of, well, not just when it worked, but when we tried it, it just turned a lot of people off. So I'm kind of over here with it because it's just very different in my dynamic when we started.
That's a great comment, Dana. Let me take that to Bob. Bob, you don't operate a hair salon, but I suspect your employees were not before open book. We're not thinking about what it would be like to be a business owner either. Yeah. Could you address Dana's concerns about?
Yeah, sure. It's a process. I mean, what we found is it's a process. It takes time. Adoption is not easy. It takes work. What we've done is, we share all the numbers. We share the company P&L. We don't, people don't know that, Mary makes this and Sally makes this and yada, yada, yada. You don't get into that minutia. We do share P&Ls every month and every quarter. But what really matters to employees at the stores is, like you said, when am I getting paid? Can I get paid? And, what is my bonus? And you can create a scoreboard. In our sense, every store has a very simple, scoreboard that we've worked with GGOB to develop that matters to us. And it's basically 6 or 7 items. And that's what they're looking at every day. It drives the number, but, it's not into, the minutia of the P&L. It's very simple, but again, it's line of sight that ultimately drives the bottom line of the company, and they share in that bonus. Simple as that.
So we have our key performance indicators for our staff, and we give them bonuses based on that. But what we found that when we shared the balance sheet and the profit and loss with anybody that wasn't managers, the mindset wasn't, wow, I want to make this better. It's, why aren't you giving me more? They just were not connecting, what it cost to run a business, what happened, no matter what we did, what we left it, not so much in charge of, but what they did respond to are the key performance indicators that we have that directly tied to their position. The culture at Pearly Boyd is these women are extremely committed to healthy and quality hair care for women that have been overlooked, right? And for being committed to timeliness, being committed to healthy hair care. They don't they're mindful of the electric bill because I have a manager or a hair traffic controller who, when she's watching the floor, because we're walk-in only and we have volume, she's managing the salon, right? So we've implemented some part of open book management, some part, but only with the managers. Okay, guys, we need to, look out for payroll. We went a little high, this month. And then that goes forward. But as far as sharing it with the shampoo assistant, we learned that it just really, really brought the morale down. And it was more, why you and not me? And so that we had to pull it out, and we just had to share it with the management.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not, the individual store employees, there's a number for sales, for wages, right? But it's not broken out into the, this woman makes this and this guy makes this. It's how the store is performing, which leads to how the company is performing. And that's, it's transparent, and it's simple to follow. And if we do better as a company, they end up making more. I
have a labor background. So to me, I'm a former labor organizer, international labor relations specialist. So I'm all about being open. But I had to pull away when I started to affect the morale. What is very welcomed in my salons is the fact that you all know where everybody's at on the pay scale. There are no secrets, right? When it comes to Dana, and they've been like, oh, Dana must be, when the COVID hit, why can't, Dana's a millionaire, she's a business owner, why can't she pay us through it? Well, no, she's not, right? That's not how this works. But it is, I don't think I'll ever reveal my salary until I'm revealing, unless they're coming out of their check to help me pay the bill, which they're not, and I don't want them to. And so I just think that I think it works for some. I think for my management team, again, it works. She enjoys and feels empowered by me sitting down and showing her what goes where. And I think it effectively allows her to manage, knowing that she's working with somebody who's not trying to get over on the staff. But as far as, when we shared it with our team, it just really killed the morale. And I think it's tied to something that I'm not really sure from what I've seen, you guys aren't really addressing, the socioeconomic and the cultural differences in a lot of our companies, and how the mindset of some of our employees is different than an accounting firm or, an established kielbasa company. It's just very, very different, and industries are very, very different. But I am happy with the fact that I can take some of it and use it with my hair traffic controllers.
We are,
Dana, this is really, can I say something real quick?
Please, Michael.
That is very important to me. You mentioned about the socioeconomic,
and cultural.
Cultural, we talk about the Great Divide, and the haves and the have-nots. This is my personal opinion. You're free to agree or disagree, but in my opinion, the free enterprise system is the most powerful engine for social justice the world has ever seen. Horatio Alger stories do you want to hear of people going from immigrants coming over to this country and starting with nothing and creating something because of their entrepreneurial and their resourcefulness? And this is what's made this country great. And I think we're at a risk of losing that because we're unwilling to grab the narrative on the power of the free market to lift people up. And part of that is our unwillingness to be transparent in how business operates and why profit is necessary, and really teach. When we opened up the books, and keep in mind, over half of my workforce, primary language is Spanish. And when we opened up the books and we started teaching them about, okay, I'll never forget, we did our first open book budget, and I got to the bottom line and I said, okay, guys, what do y'all want to do with this money? What do we want to do with this money? Clearly we're in a business that if I take everything out every year, we're not going to be around very long. So we had to reinvest this money, and they started talking about these items that we needed to invest in, whether it was equipment or whatever. And I said, wait a second, I forgot to tell you something. I said, 40% of that, this is several years ago, so 40% of that goes to the government, taxes. And they couldn't believe that 40% of that money that they were working very hard to get was going to go to the government. And I'm not trying to tell you this. I'm not trying to make a political statement here. I'm just trying to give you reality so that when you hear the word or the phrase, we need to tax the rich, they're really not taxing me. They're taxing all of us because we're not able to invest that money and grow. So I really think that you bring up a really powerful element of why it's important for us. If we don't adopt the great game of business, and there's lots of different ways, we at least need to initiate a conversation around the importance of the free market in this world, and especially in this country, because I think we are in danger of losing the narrative here.
And I also think it's about what people, and I mean people, employees want, right? It's not about how much they make an hour. It's not about, it is to socioeconomic to some extent, but there are people that make $15 an hour that want to be a part of the financial goings on of a company, right? So it's not about that. I'm saying that in my business, I'm not necessarily dealing with the descendants of immigrants. I'm dealing with the descendants of slaves. And there's a mindset that comes from that. And we don't have to go, but I'm just saying, when I tried to do open book management, it was, why you, not me. When we pulled back, put in KPIs, key performance indicators that directly affected what they were working on and gave them bonuses directly affecting how they performed, it went great. The managers, again, the air traffic controllers, the ones who are monitoring the volume on the floor, because we are walk-in only. It's not unusual to see 15 women lined up at open when we open. They said, okay, I get it, I see it, their perspective. When I talk, and I'll say this on close, when I talk to my staff, I talk about the vision, and I don't mean the vision for the company, what I see as an owner. And I literally walk outside of my salon and walk across the street, right? And I say, this is my perspective, right? And they stand at their chair or they are at the shampoo bowl, and I say, this is your perspective. In order for me to completely see my view, I need to come in and talk to you, and I need to hear what you're seeing, because I can't see what you're seeing at the chair. But in reverse, when decisions are made, I see that semi coming down the street that's swerving. So when I run in and say, everybody take cover, it's not up for discussion, because I see what's coming, because I'm the owner and I'm over there. And so that has worked well as far as just giving them a perspective on who the owner is, what she does, and the risk that she's taken by being open for, not long, but longer than they've been employed there. And then just taking it from open book to KPIs that affects you, and open book with my air traffic controller. That's it.
Guys, I hate to do it, but I think I have to end this conversation. We just got a note, I don't know if you saw it, from somebody in Sydney, Australia, who pointed out it's 3:20 a.m. there. This discussion is awesome. It was worth staying awake all night to listen to you. Thank you all, which is exactly what I want to say. We were here to talk about transparency, and you all demonstrated it. And I really appreciate that.
Wait, I have to say one thing.
Go ahead,
this
Jay.
is extremely important.
Quickly.
I've been frustrated with this for years, and I wish they would have gotten that phrase, adapt, don't adopt. You should have that on everything, because the lack of validation of people's feelings that struggle with some parts of this, but it might not work. It's kind of like, it's either you're a vegetarian or you're not. And it's extremely frustrating when parts of this don't fit well. So thank you for that. Totally has changed my mindset on this. Adapt makes me feel much better, and I'm absolutely going to adapt more of this, because I don't believe this is a one size fits all.
Anybody else got a last quick thought?
Thanks,
Lauren, you're awesome.
I really appreciate the
Thank
conversation.
you for having me.
Loved
Let's
it.
do it again next year.
All right.
Really.
My thanks to Dana White of Paralee Boyd, Jay Goltz of Artist Frame Service and Jason Home, William Vanderblumen of Vanderblumen Search Group, Michael Kilbasa of Kilbasa Smoked Meats, Chris McKee of Venturity, and Bob Schwartz of Super Suds. You guys are awesome. I do think we may have changed some lives today. I think people learned some things here, either by convincing some people to give this a shot or by convincing them to run in the other direction, which is a service as well. We all know it's not right for everyone. Thank you all for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.